Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials Podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information, resources, and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with disabilities who receive services under Section 504 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support, English speakers of other languages, and related diverse learner categories. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing information and topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. I am your host, Dr. Nakia, sending you good vibes and thanking you for joining me for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials Podcast. Thank you for joining me once again for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials Podcast. Let's go ahead and start with a little Edufaith inspirational message. This story is about an 8-year-old Alabama girl named Libby, and she used her birthday money to give back to others. Libby is a third grade student at Prattville Elementary, and she donated $550 of her birthday money to help students at a neighboring special education classroom. Due to her act of kindness, she brought toys, beanbags, cleaning supplies, and a new alphabet rug for the neighboring class. The teacher, Cheryl Davis, said she was excited to have new stuff to support students. Libby's class often collaborates with this class, and as she went into the classroom over time, she saw a need and she decided to use her birthday money and donate it and help others. Libby's parents said they were blown away by the act of kindness, and of course, they're very proud of her. Libby says she wanted to share joy with the class, and it makes her heart fill up to know that she can share and help others. Shout out to Libby for being a change in the world. This young lady is ahead of her time, and Libby, I'm sure the classroom and the students in that classroom are very grateful, as well as that teacher. And thank you for your contribution, your birthday money, to help change the world and the lives of a special needs classroom. So kudos to Libby. If you want to see that story, I will have that story on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page for you to check it out. Now let's look into some dates to remember for November. November is recognized as National Epilepsy Awareness Month. This is an opportunity to raise awareness and support for individuals with epilepsy and their families. November is also National Career Development Month. It's a time to recognize and promote career development and planning. November 14th is World Diabetes Day. We want to take some time to recognize and support those individuals with diabetes and raise awareness about the condition. November 11th is Veterans Day. This is a time that we recognize and honor our veterans who have supported our country. November 16th is National Parent Involvement Day. November 17th is Substitute Educators Day. Let's celebrate those substitutes that come in and support our students. November 20th is World Children's Day. And then we want to also always celebrate and recognize Thanksgiving, which is the last Thursday in November. We want to take this time to reflect and be thankful for what we have, be thankful for our family, our friends, and everything that we have. Express our gratitude, share, give to others, reflect, eat, hang around family and friends, watch football, and just take some time, because this is a great time to, like I said, express our gratitude and be around others during the holiday season. If you're not around family, be around friends, but we want to make sure that we celebrate Thanksgiving, which is one of my favorite holidays. Now let's shift to some essential news from the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education released the 2021-2022 State Part B data displays and Part C and B 619 data displays in September. This data summarizes each state's education data regarding services for students served under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA Part B data displays the present annual data related to children with disabilities from ages 3 to 21. Based on the data from various sources, included is information from IDEA Section 618 data, IDEA Annual Performance Report data, National Assessment of Education, National Progress of Education Progress data, the U.S. Census Bureau data, Common Core data, and Consolidated State Performance Report data. IDEA Part C and Part B 619 displays data presented about infants, toddlers, and children with disabilities from birth through ages 5. Based on the various sources included in this information, it includes IDEA Section 618 data and in IDEA Annual Performance Report data and census data. Just want to give you a little background on 618. 618 of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that each state submit data. So when I say 618, I'm just saying that each state has to provide that data under IDEA. To access and look through the data and this information, it will be on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. And under that page, you will be able to see Part B data displays as well as Part C data displays for 2021 and 2022. And that is going to be it for Essential News. Let's go ahead and dive right into our essential knowledge. And for our essential knowledge today in today's episode, we're going to talk about educational advocates and consultants. Many times families have challenges and difficulties with understanding or providing services or accessing services for their child with special needs. And a lot of times families choose to hire an educational consultant or advocate to help support through the process. Today, I want to talk about what's the difference between an advocate and a consultant, and then provide some essential tips for families and educators and leaders when working with advocates and educational consultants. So let's just go ahead and get started with our episode for today and dive into the essential knowledge. First off, when you're looking at an educational advocate, it's essential, especially if you have a child with special needs or facing challenges in the educational system. You want to make sure that you ask certain questions or you consider certain things when you're selecting an educational advocate. First off, let's define what an advocate is. An advocate is a professional who helps individuals, typically students and their families, navigate the complexities of the education system and advocate for the child's educational rights and needs. These advocates ensure that students receive appropriate and equitable education services, particularly in cases with students with special needs, disabilities, or other challenges that may require additional support or accommodations. When you're looking at an educational consultant, a consultant provides guidance, advice, and expertise to individual families, educational institutions, or organizations seeking assistance with various aspects of education. These consultants are typically knowledgeable about education systems, curriculum options, school placement, and educational strategies. And they offer the expertise to help clients make informed decisions about education and related to education. An advocate may work more with the families. A consultant may work with families and institutions and organizations based on the expertise, support students with varying exceptionalities and diverse learners based on their areas of expertise. Educational advocates and both consultants both work in the education field, but they serve two different distinct roles. Here are some of the key differences between an advocate and a consultant. When you're looking at an advocate, the purpose of the advocate is to advocate for the rights and the needs of the students, especially those students with disabilities or those students who are facing challenges in the system. The primary goal of an advocate is usually to ensure that those students receive those accommodations and their rights and the laws under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. A lot of times, the clientele for advocates, they typically work with students, with their families, and they represent those interests in helping them navigate the education system. They often serve as a voice for students who cannot advocate for themselves effectively, and they work on behalf of the parent to make those educational decisions with the parent collaboratively. Educational advocates are well versed in education laws and regulations related to IDEA and special education. They may also know the laws and information about Section 504 and the Office of Civil Rights. They often engage in legal processes such as due process hearings and help families file complaints or resolve disputes between families and schools. The advocates assist in developing individual education plans for students with disabilities, and then they also may help families with writing those Section 504 plans and helping designate those appropriate accommodations for those students. A lot of advocates like to resolve disputes between parents and schools, but sometimes advocates may choose to go through the legal process and go through filing processes of due process hearings and filing complaints. Advocates often work with families in mediations and legal actions if necessary. And sometimes some advocates even go to court if the process escalates. When we're looking at educational consultants, the purpose of the educational consultant, they offer guidance and expertise to individuals, families, and institutions. Their goal is to focus on a couple of things and then provide that advice and the subject matter in which they're the expert in. The information they provide helps clients to make informed decisions about academic matters. Consulting may be a little bit more global, where they work with institutions and organizations. Usually the advocates work on behalf of the family and they solely support the families with those services. When you're looking at the educational consultant and the clientele, consultants work with many clients. They work with parents, students, schools, and organizations. Their services may include school placement, college admission counseling, college advocacy with accommodations in college, test preparation, curriculum development, and professional development for educators. So consultants provide a little bit more global, holistic work within their expertise. So, for instance, if it's a special education consultant, they may work with schools, special education programs, families in special education, organizations, and provide information about special education and colleges, etc. The expertise of a consultant, they typically have expertise in a specific area. So they might have college accommodation advocacy, they may have curriculum design, they may have IDEA specialization aspects of expertise, or Section 504, or working with diverse learners. They have a certain area of expertise and they provide those recommendations and strategies and supports and sometimes even program development based on that consultants' areas of expertise. Education and consultants do not have a legal role in advocating for students' rights or handling legal disputes. However, some may be advocates and consultants combined, where they may work with both, where they may serve and work for the family on those legal matters, but then also provide the consulting services in a dual lens. Consultants assist with education planning. They help clients set goals. They choose appropriate educational paths and they access resources to achieve educational objectives to help support students, whether it's a student with a disability or it could be a consultant who work in another area of expertise, such as curriculum. Educational advocates primarily focus on legal rights and advocacy and supports for students with disabilities and those facing challenges. In contrast, consultants offer that expertise, advice, and guidance on various academic matters to help clients make those informed decisions. When you're looking at what you need to provide or what you need to look for to have someone help you through the process, you may look into someone who may be an advocate slash consultant because they'll have that background knowledge and the expertise, but then they can serve as that dual role as someone who knows the background and can advocate on behalf of your child, but they're pretty global enough to know how the school system operates and know how to ensure that your child gets the best services in both sides. Some families prefer to have an advocate. Some families prefer to have a consultant. And a lot of times you may have someone who is an advocate and a consultant could provide the support on both sides of the arena. It's really going to be up to the family and families as you make your decisions on what you need and how can someone help support your child for your child to be successful in the school setting. Let's dive into our essential tips. Essential tip for parents. The first thing you need to do before you seek an advocate or a consultant is to be able to understand your child's needs. So before you choose an advocate or a consultant, make sure you understand what you want them to accomplish or help you with your child's educational needs and challenges. This will help you find the right advocate with the right expertise and experience. And this will also ensure that you can communicate with the advocate what you're looking for specifically so they can help support you with whatever you're looking for to help seek those services for your child or enhance the services for your child. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to seek recommendations. Ask for recommendations from other parents, community members, sometimes other teachers in the school, school counselors, school personnel, but ask and seek recommendations about that advocate or that consultant and their services. See if you can find out something about their history and their background and what's their knowledge base. Others may have valuable insights on advocates who have successfully helped children with similar needs. Another thing I would recommend is to verify the credentials. You want to ensure that whoever you're hiring as an advocate or a consultant are qualified. They have certifications, they have the experiences and the expertise to support your child in education advocacy. You want to make sure that you're looking for someone who is well versed in the laws and the regulations and research and in education. You can go through and look at their websites. If they have a website, go and look into their websites, dive into their biographies, look into their resumes, look into their social media profiles, their LinkedIn, look at the testimonials. So look and verify that person's credentials to see if that person can offer something that you need for your child. Number four is to interview multiple advocates. So don't settle for the first advocate or consultant that you come across. Interview others, interview several, maybe look at three of them and talk to them and have a little consultation and see what they offer and see if this is going to help you support your child's needs. Listen to their communication styles, interview those advocates, and then look and make sure you make an informed decision about who's going to be the right fit. Verify those credentials, seek those recommendations, understand your child's needs, and then look at multiple advocates and get that information to decide if this is going to be the right person who's going to be committed to help me with my child's needs. Compatibility. You want to make sure that you have an advocate or someone that you feel comfortable working with. Some people have personality conflicts, and that's okay. The advocate that you work with, you want to make sure that they meet your style. So if you are big on communication, you want a good communicator, and you want to ask that advocate or consultant, how do they communicate? Can you call that person by phone? Are they okay with you texting them? Can you email them? So you want to make sure that you have someone compatible that you're working with because you're going to be a team. So you want that communicator, that listener, and someone who respects your child's individuality and their needs. The next thing is knowledge of special education laws. You want to make sure that you have an advocate versed in special education laws and laws related to Section 504 in the Office of Civil Rights, laws related to the Individual Disabilities Education Act. You want to make sure they understand the rights, the laws, due process hearings, and all the processes. You want to make sure they're also well versed in education as well. They need to know how school districts are run. They need to know how to communicate with teachers and special education teachers and administrators. So you want someone who understands special education, Section 504, the agencies related to that, and school districts. Track record is the next one. You want to make sure that you have someone with a track record. I mentioned seeking recommendations. I mentioned verifying those credentials, but you also want to have or search for an advocate or a consultant with a great track record. Someone who has some testimonials, who have had some positive feedback based on their past clients, someone who can be a good indicator of effectiveness and can work with parents and you as a parent to help support you in what you need. Look at that person's track record, seek their credentials and recommendations, and see what they have to offer and if that's going to be the best match for you. I mentioned this before when I talked about compatibility, but I also want to reiterate you want to make sure that you have an advocate with effective communication, be able to explain any legal, complex educational concepts in a way that you understand. And you also want an advocate that when you ask questions, they're able to answer your questions in a way that you understand, that they're keeping up and they're providing their regular progress and updates on the case and the status of your case, and that they're communicating in a timely manner. Cost and payment. When you're looking at an advocate, you want to discuss those fees and go ahead and ask the advocate upfront what their fees are. A lot of times they'll give a free consultation, and during that free consultation, you guys will talk. You'll talk about what you're looking for and what you need, and then you can talk about a financial arrangement and what's going to work best. Some advocates work hourly, while others may charge a flat fee and do the work on a contingency basis. Go ahead and talk about cost and payment to make sure that that advocate is someone that you can afford and that you can continue to put the cost based on how long it takes to get the services or go through the process to support your child. I want you to trust your instincts when you're making this critical decision. If something doesn't feel right or you have concerns about an advocate, it's okay to keep looking until you find the right fit. So if you feel like this is not going to work, you feel like you and the advocate are not compatible, or they're not a good communicator, or they're a good communicator, but the communication doesn't meet your needs, or they're not as well versed in what your child needs, continue to look into other options and move forward. Advocacy and consulting is a business, and what you want to do is find out who can help support your child. And if that person's not it, don't waste time and money. Move on, find out how you can cancel the contract if you already signed the contract, and move forward to find that right fit for your child. And then a legal consultation. When you're looking at those cases and working with school districts, you want to make sure that you have an advocate who is versed in the legal advice, or maybe they even know some attorneys if you have to go to the next level. Usually, advocates help support parents and the school district, but sometimes things may get a little bit more legal. And so you want someone who can maybe refer you to an attorney who can provide the best legal advice based on an attorney's information and interests. A lot of times, like I said, advocates are really versed in laws and legal information. However, they're not attorneys, but they may be partnered up with an attorney, or they may have an attorney affiliate that they can refer you to if you have to go forward and go to court. Can they provide examples of some successful cases that they've handled? What is their record, and can they give you evidence of that record? Have they had some favorable outcomes in situations? Can they share specific cases or stories that highlight their advocacy or consultant skills? How do they communicate and keep you informed? What is their communication style and frequency? How will they provide the regular updates and progress on your case? How do you reach them in case of emergencies? Do they have a network of professionals or experts they consult with? And that's what I mentioned as far as the attorney. A lot of times, advocates or consultants work within their own practice. However, when things escalate, they may have a certain attorney that they may refer you to. Are they connected with any other educators or special educators or experts or psychologists or community members? Can they provide you additional resources or guide you to some additional sites and resources and references or books to help you? Ask about their current caseload. Will they have time to provide that specific support and detail that you need for your child's case? And are they available for meeting and consultations when you need them? Are they going to be available during school hours to come to a meeting at the meeting is at school? Are they going to be available 8 o'clock in the morning? Are they going to be available in the afternoons? What is their availability as far as working with you and working with the school system to support your child's needs? And then how do they handle conflicts of interest? When there are conflicts of interest involved, what is their policy on conflicts of interest? And then what is their policy on to terminate services and things like that? Those are some essential tips for parents when you're looking for education, advocates, and consultants. So I'm going to run through these one more time. First one is understand your child's needs. The second one is seek recommendations. The third is verify credentials. The fourth is interview multiple advocates. The fifth is looking for that compatibility. The sixth is their knowledge of special education laws and legal matters. Number 7 is their track record. Number 8, clear communication and how they communicate. Number 9, cost and payment. 10, trust your instincts. And 11 is legal consultations. For my leaders and educators, a lot of the same information that I went through as far as the advocacy and consultant for parents is kind of the same when you're looking for a consultant and you're working with a consultant. When you're working with an advocate with families, make sure that you remain professional and that you have the appropriate representation at the table to represent the school district when you're working with advocates. A lot of times districts have other personnel who are in compliance departments within the district to help come to those meetings and help support you and help facilitate those meetings with you as a school district. When you're looking for a consultant who's going to help support a program within your school, you want to make sure that you seek the recommendations, you verify their credentials, you interview those multiple advocates, look at the compatibility to what the program and what you're trying to get the consultant to work with and what your school needs. Make sure they have knowledge of the expertise and the background they need to help support your organization. Look into their track record and how they're going to come support your staff and provide their consulting services. Talk about cost and payment and how you're going to pay for the services with the consultant. Trust your instincts, and then make sure that you have a clear path and that consultant provides a clear, succinct program of how they're going to provide those services over time for your school district. A book excerpt from today is going to come from Essential Tips for Parents. So, looking at Essential Tips for Parents, Chapter 5 is Know Your Stuff, Knowledge is Power. And in that, since we're talking about educational advocates and consultants, as a parent working with your child, one of the first things I mentioned as far as the recommendation was to know your child and seek the knowledge and make sure that you understand your child's needs. In chapter 5 of my book of Essential Tips for Parents, I provide some knowledge and background for parents, and that starts on chapter 7. The first thing I quote is you must learn the rules of the game, and then you must play better than anyone else. Parents, you must learn the rules of the game when you're working and you're advocating for your child and you're working with advocates or consultants to seek the best successful outcome for your child. So I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 5, page 70 of Knowledge is Power, which is essential tips for parents. The famous quote, knowledge is power, takes on many meanings in life. As a parent, you must empower yourself with essential knowledge about your child's disability, learning styles, and social emotional health and behaviors. The journey of parenting a child with a disability can be confusing and frustrating. When I was going through my journey with my son Alex, I became defensive towards teachers. They constantly gave updates and information that sounded dire and like my child was the worst in the class. In my heart, I knew he was not, but my lack of knowledge made me defensive, where I put up a wall and dreaded hearing about all their perceptions and problems with my son. I felt uninformed and inadequate, and I was an educator. I was in my fourth year teaching in a general education class, so my knowledge about students with disabilities was minimal. Once I began to research and learn more about recommendations and gain knowledge, I still didn't like what they were saying. However, I didn't feel intimidated by my fellow educators and coworkers that were teaching Alex. In this chapter, I will provide some essential knowledge and information about services offered in schools and other insightful information for a parent with a child with a disability. The more you know, the more you can work with the schools to provide equitable educational opportunities for your child. And then in that chapter, I go into it and I talk about various things, including special education and Section 504 services. I go into the response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support, how that supports students. I discuss what a manifestation determination meeting is on page 77. I go into related services on page 78. I talk about individual healthcare plans on page 79. And then I go into acronyms because in education, as a parent, oftentimes we sit at the table and they spit out so many acronyms and we don't understand what these acronyms are. So on page 81, I go through the acronyms. And this is not only something that can help a parent, but it can also help an educator as well. When I was a school leader and I moved to Georgia, one of the first things I did sitting at the table is I heard a lot of different acronyms because the acronyms in Georgia were different than the ones in Florida. So I had to go and research those acronyms as an educator and learn what these different acronyms meant, especially working with students with disabilities. In chapter 5, I also highlight the education agencies that support students with disabilities. So I talk about the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights and provide an overview there, state departments of education, school districts, which are called the local education agencies, and then schools and their role in supporting individuals with disabilities. At the end of the chapter, which ends on page 96, I provide some essential tips for parents. And some of those essential tips include when an issue or problem arises, contact the school directly to problem solve. If it is unsuccessful, send something in writing or email to request a conference. If that is unsuccessful, try to go to the teacher first. But if you're unsuccessful with communication with the teacher, go up the chain, go through the administration next, and go through the flow of the hierarchy of supports for your schools and your child's district. You move up the chain, starting with the teacher who's in charge. And then if you're unsuccessful there, then move up with your communication with the administrator. If you still feel issues are unresolved, you may decide to contact and reach out to the school district personnel to support and intervene with your child's issue. The best tip is to allow the school a chance to resolve before moving up the ranks. And then if you feel like you're unsuccessful after all of those attempts, then you may look into hiring an advocate or a consultant to help support you with your child's needs and getting the supports that you need for your child to be successful. I have read for you Essential Tips for Parents, Chapter 5, Knowledge is Power, page 70. From my essential, I'm also going to read an excerpt from my Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders. And here are some tips when you're having those meetings. If you're an educator, here's some essential tips when you're preparing for those meetings where you may have an advocate or consultant at the table who's supporting families. You want to make sure that you review that child's information and progress. You want to make sure that you have all those records and information readily available for you to reflect on. You want to make sure that you inform your principal about the situation, if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, so they can make sure that they have the proper personnel at the table to help support the district. As a school district or as a team, you might have a prep meeting where you get ready for the advocate or consultant and have all your data and information ready and have an agenda ready so the meeting can flow smoother. You will focus on the data and keep everything student centered and make sure that you provide some work samples and be able to explain the information to the family and their advocate and their consultant. You may want to have a start time and an end time, an agenda to make things go smoother, discuss any relevant information and any parent concerns during that meeting, and then create some norms, assign roles, and schedule breaks if needed. And then in the end, you want to make sure that you leave that meeting, making sure that you have provided everyone, including the consultant, the advocate, and the family, all the information that you answered all their concerns. And as always, educators and leaders and parents, we also always want to remain professional and student centered because the ultimate outcome is what is important and how are we going to support that student and that child's needs. I've read from you essential tips for parents, and I read a little bit of essential tips for special education leaders. Now it's time to shift to our words of wisdom. Every time you are in an IEP meeting, know that you are not just advocating for your child, you are advocating for the next child after you. That quote is from Aliana Sosa.
You've got mail.
It's time for our essential advice, Ask Dr. Nakia, or share an inspirational story. I want to use this platform to support and spotlight fellow educators, families, and community members. If you have a question, want advice, or to share a wonderful inspirational story on this podcast, feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL@gmail.com. May read your letter, provide advice, or share your story on this podcast. Disclaimer, all listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. Edufaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally responsible for anyone's actions based on information provided on this podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Edufaith Educational Services. Some services offered through Edufaith Consulting includes consulting and advocacy for parents, consulting for educators, leaders, and school districts, college accommodation advocacy, consulting and training, advocacy in supporting individuals with college accommodations at the post-secondary level, as well as university trainings to support individuals with disabilities and services, parent education trainings, college and career coaching for students who are entering the workforce or the post-secondary college setting, business and district professional development and trainings for churches, nonprofits, businesses, districts, and communities, specializing in services for diverse learners, including students with disabilities, interventions under the multi-tier system of support, English speakers of other languages, education and leadership coaching, program development under services under IDEA, Section 504, trainings, diverse learners, and essential tips books. Feel free to go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to view all the services that Edufaith Educational Services. I want to encourage my believers to be blessed. All others, be kind, be well, and be the change. Follow Edufaith on social media. Twitter, EdufaithS. On Instagram, Edufaith 2021. On LinkedIn, Edufaith Educational Services. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Edufaith Educational Services and the Edufaith Essentials Podcast. Subscribe and follow Edufaith Essentials on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page and listen to the Edufaith Essentials podcast on all streaming platforms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Have a wonderful day and get essential.